And folks, welcome back to Season 9, Episode 2 of Fowl Players Radio. Today we welcome an old friend of mine, Dave Nachodsky. Dave is a producer and one of the founders of Invisible Sound Studio in Baltimore. By his own estimation, he produced over 600 projects in well over 30 years there. We talked about recording music, what bands must do to properly prepare for studio recording, some of the incredible amplifiers, microphones, and other equipment that was at Invisible Sound over the years, and some of the acts that recorded there, like Red Dye Number 9, Andy Bop, The Last Picture Show, Fit of Frustration, Orange Seed Parade, and 20 Ripped Angel. Where do we know those bands from? After nearly 35 years in business, Invisible Sound closed in 2018, but Dave is now working for Stages Music Arts in Cockeysville, and he will also tell us more about that. The Fowl Players of Perryville are now booking shows for 2022. We have some shows coming up on Maryland Party Boat and Western Maryland Scenic Railroad. For more information, please call 443-600-0446 or see www.fowlplayersofperryville.com. You can also reach us at fowlplayersofperryville@yahoo.com. Subscribe for free at fowlplayersradio.com or listen wherever you find podcasts online. No matter what platform you listen on, you can help us greatly by giving us a fair review and a 5-star rating. Also, be sure to visit our page on patreon.com, www.patreon.com/fowlplayersradio. You can also see this. If you're watching this, you're looking at our YouTube channel. Look for Fowl Players Radio on YouTube and watch our podcasts there too. We're still available on audio on Apple and Spotify and Stitcher, www.fowlplayersradio.com, or wherever else you'll find podcasts. Stick around for Dave Nachodsky. Back to another episode of Fowl Players Radio. I've brought back another old friend of mine from years ago, Dave Nachodsky. For the longest time, Dave is a owner, and he was a music producer at Invisible Sound Studio, and we've had Red Dye Number 9 on the show. I've mentioned my old band Orange Seed Parade, who recorded there, and a number of other bands over the years that we've referred to on the show have recorded at Invisible Sound. Dave currently works for Stages Music Arts, sort of doing the same thing, I guess. And welcome, yeah. Dave. Welcome. It's good to have you finally. You've been on my list for a while, by the way.
Oh, okay. Great. It's great to be here.
Well, great. Well, good to have you, Dave. So, I know, you and I, not only, knowing each other for a good while, but we've had a lot of friends in common. And I know that, years ago, you've been playing music forever. You've been involved with music forever. I know one of your earliest things that you did, or one of the earliest things that I'd heard of, played with Ed Dilley and Joe Rinaldo in a band called Larceny. Is that true?
That's right. That was my second or third band. So, yes.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, back in the 80s, because, and that's kind of how I found out about Invisible Sound, was through Ed and Johnny.
Right.
Mentioned you guys and said that you were starting a studio up there on Mayfield, so.
Right. That was the house. That was the first one.
That was the first one. And that was a great place. I really enjoyed recording there. And, Joe's father was upstairs and probably had one of the coolest dads ever to even
he let it happen.
That,
He let people play as loud as they could, and he couldn't hear the TV, and we had to hook up extension speakers closer to him.
Yeah.
So you could hear the TV when the bass amps were going, especially,
Right. He probably had his drink shaken off at the table and everything while he was trying to.
Probably, yes. And I know the neighbors heard it too. So yeah. There was a story. I forget which band. It may have been like Dominic or the Fit or somebody. There was a heavy band and they played really loud. They were really loud, and someone outside put an ice pick in the hood of the guy's car, like through the hood. It was raining, and he didn't know until he started dripping on him on the way home, and there was a hole from an ice pick. So somebody was pissed that they were either too loud or parked in their spot, maybe, but who knows what. But it was not a bad neighborhood. It was a decent neighborhood,
No, it was a very nice neighborhood. It was a very nice neighborhood. I remember it well. Is that Hamilton?
Yes.
Yeah, Hamilton.
Yeah, off of sort of between Hamilton Avenue and the other one off of Bel Air Road.
Right up that way, right up that way. Yeah, that was a great place to record, and I've got a lot of memories from there. But
yeah,
and having done this for such a long time, I'm sure you've probably seen it all. People coming in and out, and you've probably dealt with young bands like us back in those days. Coming
back in the day, yeah.
And then more experienced people over the years. And what are some things you would say, if a group of youngsters came to you nowadays? I mean, I know some things I would tell them to do to prepare. What are some things you would kind of tell them to do to prepare for the studio?
Well, the best thing is to just rehearse the songs until you know them backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Because when you have to spend a lot of your percentage of your like brain power trying to remember when the bridge happens, you're not going to be playing as well as you can.
Right.
And so rehearsal. I even like rehearsing without vocals, which is kind of weird, and to really know instrumentally what's going on. And the other part is to record it, even if it's a crappy recording in your basement, and play it back and listen to it. Because when you're playing, you're using a lot of that brain power to play. And how are you listening to, say, the other guitar player when he could be playing a bad chord against yours? But you can't really listen and play at the same time the same way you can when you just sit and put the guitar down and listen. I'm going to listen back to it. And I've told bands that a million times. Record yourself and listen back to it, and you'll be amazed at what you hear when you go, wait a minute, what is the other guy, what are you doing at that time? That's not right. That's not what I'm like, we're clashing or whatever. And you'll figure that out, because otherwise I hear it when you're in the studio.
Yeah.
And when it's too late. And then a lot of times the guys have practiced their mistake. So they make a mistake. They're playing the wrong chord against the band. And they've played it that way so many times that when you tell them, oh, no, here's the right chord, do that. And they're playing the song, and they get up to that point and they instantly go to the wrong chord again because they drilled it into their brain, So it's very hard to make changes with a young band, like on the fly. So the more that they rehearse it and the more they listen back to that rehearsal, even in low fidelity, doesn't need to be at a studio.
Right.
That, to me, that's the best advice. And then bring extra strings and extra picks. Bring the stuff extra snare drum head, things that can break and they'll just kill you in the middle of a session. The guy breaks a string and that stops the whole show. Everybody's warmed up. They're into it. They're feeling the vibe and the space. The guy breaks a string, and then that's bad enough. I got to put a string on. Oh, wait, I don't have any. Now what are you going to do?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and then what is someone got to ride up to the music store, to get strings on a Sunday, So, be prepared. That's the Boy Scout thing, right? So, that would be the other thing. Bring all the extra things.
Sure. That's preparation is a very good thing. And what I would say, it's a vital thing. It's a vital thing. You have to do that. I'm not really doing music so much anymore as I am doing things like film and voiceovers and things like that.
Okay.
And, being prepared when you go in there. And a lot of the lessons I learned, I kind of learned the hard way, as you remember, when I was a youngster at Invisible Sound, and the thing is too, the preparation is such a vital thing. And I'll kind of compare it to when you're playing in a band. Their first couple of shows out there, you get the butterflies, you get the wiggly knees and everything.
Yeah.
And you're nervous, and that's no way to walk into a studio, and that was one thing that used to kill me back then, was because it's like, I'm not in a band with all this other noise around me. I'm playing isolated by myself and everybody's watching.
Yep.
And that just used to drive me up the wall.
Right.
And I just had the hardest time with that back then. But you're learning it inside and out. And and the thing is too, is that I would tell youngsters too, if I could kind of go back and based on my experience, there's no rush to getting this done. You'd be better off postponing a session.
Right. And I've done that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In the beginning of a session when it was clear they weren't ready, I said, guys, you're into it for this much money right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if we stop right now, you're going to save all the rest of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm being honest, you need to go home and you need to get better and rehearse it
mm-hmm.
and come back prepared. And then I'm going to get the money either way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So say it's $1,000 for their whole budget. Right. So they're going to record. And at the end of the recording, I'm going to get the money. But are they going to get a recording? And that's the problem. So I've sent people home and said, listen, call me back in a month and let's spend the same amount of time and the same money.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to, if you're better prepared than this, you're going to get something.
Right.
And that's, been those sort of disaster sessions where from the beginning, it's just like, I can tell it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, they're either going to have nothing at the end of this, and they're never going to come back to me again either, because they're going to go, oh, that experience was so terrible. We didn't get a product.
Right.
They may not blame me, but they may not blame themselves. It just may be like, we don't want to go back to that. Let's go somewhere else next time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
sure.
And like the history of, I did all of Red Dye's albums at that period were done in my studio. There was a band called Splitsville that I did all their records except their first one.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back because they knew we're going to get something from this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get a great sounding record.
Right. And I'm guessing over time, as people get more and more used to being in a studio environment and, knowing what they need to do to go in there, it probably gets easier for them. It sure does,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And also the modern equipment is so much better. Mm-hmm. The way you can hear, you can hear so much better. Yeah. The headphone systems are better. Everything is better. Mm-hmm. So a youngster recording now has it way better than we used to. Be.
Didn't I remember back in those days, we were recording on reel to reel, and I think it was 16 track that you had down there. And then I can remember having to, doing, punches, having to go back and do punches. And then also too, I don't know if you guys did it, but I've seen in other places where they're using a razor blade and they're splicing the tape together. God, that had to have been tedious.
I did a fair share of that. Very tedious editing on the tape. So if the guy liked take one up to the solo and then he liked take three for the solo, you had to sit there and it took hours. It took a long time to edit. Some people would say, let's just take tonight and edit and get some parts together. And it would just take night of cutting tape and try not to lose little bits of tape. Like, a 2-foot splice is like something.
Oh yeah.
And you got to save it.
I could just imagine. And I could just imagine the frustration of cutting off too much or something like that. And then you have to go back to
try to tape it back on. That's what you would do. Yeah.
Oh gosh. That's just, oh God, that would drive me up the wall. I just, I guess you're probably glad for the being able to use a mouse, I guess, and kind of do it.
Yes, but I got to say the experience of that is the old school, the history, and the reason why, like a lot of the modern things, there's plugins that emulate the older thing. Even tape, you can get a plugin that emulates tape, and the younger kids are always asking, like, well, what's the big deal? And they don't have that experience. So I'm glad I got the experience of it all. Even the early digital was on tape.
Right.
The ADATs. And that was the worst of both worlds. You got the wait time of having to rewind it. And then you got that it wasn't very good digital yet. It wasn't very good.
Right.
You kind of got the worst of both worlds in that world. So that we had to run that for a while. After tape, that's what came in. The ADATs, and they would try and synchronize the machines and they wouldn't work right. And I always had, so they were 8 tracks of machine. You added more machines, you got more tracks. And I always, however many tracks we were, I had to have 2 extra machines.
Oh, sure,
Because
sure.
there'd always be one at the repair place waiting to be picked up, and I would have a broken one ready to go back.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
every 2 weeks, I would have to go down to Chuck Levin's to the repair shop and take a broken one and swap it with a good one. And you still needed, like, if you wanted 24 tracks, you still needed 3 of them. So I had to have 5 of them to have 24 tracks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeez, wow.
So that's all that is over, man. The modern technology really is something, and sounds great, is fast to work with. But even now when I'm in digital and I'm editing and I'm fast, people are like, how are you so fast to do that? And I'm like, well, back in the day, I had to do it on tape, and you just had to wait until forever. Just got good at it.
Yeah, that I can imagine how somebody with your experience, doing it like that would be a lot quicker with the new technology that's out nowadays. I mean, you'd be a real wizard at it now. I mean, they pretty much simplified it to the point where what a piece of cake this is,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Oh boy, I think, I mean, technology again, the things that we used years ago, and I'm sure this is something you probably have to stay on top of, because I'm sure from the time I was in there in the early 90s, up until, Fritz went back, my old bandmates went back with their other project they did, 20 Ripped Angel was in there with Fritz and Sean and those guys.
Yeah, they did a few records.
Yeah, they did. They did quite a few in there. And they were in there, I think, from maybe 2000, maybe 5 through, 10 or something like that.
Yeah,
and I'm sure everything was different from, Orange Seed to that point, and then probably even from their point until now, things are probably light years apart, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but a band like that, the technical thing is not really how they work.
Yeah.
In other words, Orange Seed would have been, or later Fritz's 20 Ripped Angel would have been just as happy now recording the tape as they would be recording digital, because they like to play together all together at once.
Yeah.
So the overdubbing and the amount of tracks is not really come into play. It all becomes about getting the right feel playing together.
Sure.
What's great is that's a very old school sort of mentality, I feel. But it's coming back again. I'm getting bands that want to record, like here at Stages, we have 3. I have a big room and 2 isolation rooms.
Yeah.
So three different recording rooms. Plus there's a closet I could put stuff in, and there's the control room. So I could have scratch vocals in the control room. I could isolate everything. And some of the bands take advantage of that, but many of the bands go, no, man, we want to be in one room all together. Let it bleed. No headphones. We want to hear each other in the room. And you can talk to us out of a speaker or something. We don't care. We don't want you take away those headphones, and then you have a whole different kind of freedom. It feels more like you're at a rehearsal. You're at your rehearsal,
Right. But I was just kind of referring to too that, you go from tape to software, and I'm sure that, probably, the technology when it comes to, the types of software you used 10 years ago are probably, it's always evolving, always changing. There's always a better mousetrap being built.
Yeah.
And I mean, not only do you have to, master what you're working with now, I mean, I guess you got to keep reading and, reading your magazines and your websites and everything, and finding out about what the next mousetrap's going to be, I guess, right?
No, that's true. That was always the case, though. With even older equipment, you always had a newer version of something coming in, or new techniques, or new ways to do things, or just new trends. Like a trend, the trend now is a little more live. People want it to feel live. I haven't tracked a band like back then. We would do the drums alone, and then we would do the bass to the drums, and then we would do each guitar, and then the vocals. Now I never do that. The bands want to come in as a unit, and maybe they don't sing, or maybe they sing a scratch vocal. They redo it. But they want it to be as much like a unit as possible. And then if you get flute parts and stuff, overdubs. They do that,
Mhm.
but the core of it is now like more like back in the day when we only had one room. We either had to track it up piece at a time, or you all had to fit in that room. And in the basement, it was a small room,
Yes, it was.
and you all had to fit in there and play on top of each other.
Right.
And that was out of necessity, but now it's like they have the option to isolate, and more often than not, they're like, no, we'll play together.
Right.
So
Yeah. One thing that I remembered too, and something you guys are really known for is Invisible Sound Studio is also now known as, what was it, the North American Amplifier Museum too.
Yeah, the North American Guitar Amplifier Museum.
That's right. And boy, did you guys have some great gear. I mean,
yeah.
Where did you? How did this get started? I know that Joe is a real, I guess, a tone geek, and I'm sure that you are too.
Yeah, well, he's a guitar player, and I was a bass player. So naturally, he had 3 or 4 or 5 amps, just normal, a Fender Twin and some Marshalls and maybe a Vox, just to fulfill his guitar playing Jones, right? And then I was a bass player, so I had an SVT and some smaller ones and a couple other amp pegs and a Fender just for my bass playing thing. So we put them in that room, and then people saw it and they would say, oh, nice collection. This was at the house. And then the next session, the guy would bring a guitar amp and go, hey, man, will you trade this for studio time? This was down in my basement and nobody uses it, and I'll trade it. And we would be like, sure, we'll give you 2 hours for that Fender Tweed amp or something back then. Oh, yeah. And maybe it was broken. Maybe it worked. The guy didn't care. Nobody cared. And then we started lining them up on the wall. It got so much that all 4 walls were full of amps. And then it really was a collection. It got so much we had to move the amps out into the laundry room to be able to fit a band. It was so tight. And it got a little crazy. And then, of course, when we moved to the warehouse in 1990 is when we had this huge space that just absorbed that stuff. And it was like, wow, we can get more. And then I started with drums because that was fun to collect. And this was the time before eBay and before Guitar Center and before the internet. So now you can just Google something and buy it from California, right?
Sure.
Mail it to you. Some vintage thing. Well, back then you had to go to the old mom and pop music stores and the pawn shops, and you had to hear about it. So and so selling a such and such, and you would have to go there, drive to DC or somewhere to somebody's house and buy the thing and find it, right? So it was just way more fun, and everything was cheap. It was used. It wasn't considered vintage. It was considered used old stuff.
Right.
Like this old guitar amp. It wasn't vintage. And the values were nowhere near what they are now. And so but they were the history of music, the history of rock and roll especially. So we were just grabbing everything and started into microphones because I could use all this stuff. And then that was the other beautiful thing. A band would come in, and they would come in with their guitars in their hand and drumsticks. And they'd be like, let's pick what we want to use out of your stuff. And the guitar players would pick guitar amps and the bass amp. And the drummer would go through. At the end, I had 22 drum kits. So I would be like, what size are you thinking? What era? Well, I want Ringo, Beatle era. And it's like, I got that. Or they'd be like, I want John Bonham. I got that. Whether they sounded like that or not is up to them, right? But I got that kit. And we would pull out all the stuff, and it pretty much make the sound of the record right there from our equipment. And then the mics were the same idea. I had 150 microphones that I could pick and choose. And if something wasn't working, hey, that's okay. I got more different ones. Let's try this. Let's try that. And you could just go through and find something that worked for what they were looking for.
You sure did. I mean, I just remember looking through, when I came up to visit, later on, I think I came by to one of, 20 Ripped Angels sessions just to come by.
Okay.
And My God. I mean, I saw the microphones you had, the ones that you had out. I'm sure you had other ones packed away.
Right.
And I was just like, good Lord, look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was really, that just gave you such a variety of things. And when bands wanted to come in and do something experimental, I'm sure that
Right.
you probably had a sound for or a piece of equipment for just about every kind of sound that you wanted to get,
Yep. Yep. It was all there. And so even now I don't have that. No one has that amount of equipment. Like, there isn't a studio that has that amount of stuff. We went crazy with it. But,
that was
even now
insane.
but I've learned so much from that and all the experience with using all the different amps and the different things. So when someone comes in here and says, hey, I want this sound, I'm like, okay, you need that Vox amp right there. And you should use your Fender guitar or you should use your Gibson, depending what they're describing. And a lot of times they don't know the sound. They just know, I want to sound like so-and-so or a song. They'll play me a song like, can you get that guitar sound? And I'm like, yeah, what do you have here? What do we have here? Use this, this, and this. But that all came from using every amp known to man, and every drum kit and every, just about, and many different microphones and the placement and where you put the stuff and how you set it.
Wow. I mean, the expertise you gained from that is just amazing,
Yeah, and it was experimenting with them too, on them, so to speak, but it always had a good result because as soon as a guy plugged in and hit a chord and that was that sound, it was like, yes, that's it. Let's go. And then they were so energized, they made the session better because they're like, man, the sounds are bitching. Everything's working. I can hear myself. I can hear everybody else. Let's record an album. And that's the best way to come in. When everything's dragging and not working, how do you expect people to bring music out of themselves?
Right.
Oh, by the way, I know you can't hear and I know it's terrible and the sounds are no good, but try and make music. Make this sound like you care,
Right.
And
right.
it doesn't work. The vibe has to be, and that's the other thing. I've worked with there was one guitar player in a blues band. He's an older guy, and he was really never been to a studio, but he'd played his entire life in clubs, blues. And so the band were bringing him in, and they warned me. They're like, Dave, you got to be careful. Our guitar player's never been in a studio. He doesn't understand any of the technology, anything. And if he freezes, we'll never make a record. And so they brought him in, and he came in, and he had a brown Fender amp from the 60s, and he had a Telecaster from the 60s, and he walked past our brown amps from the 60s, and he went, and he just kind of looked around at all the other amps and all the other things that he recognized. And I know what happened. A wheel turned in his head that said, music made here. And he sat down, put his amp down and plugged it in, and I put a mic in front of it. And I said, hey, you have to wear these headphones. And he was like, oh, okay. He'd never worn headphones before. And I started, I was sending him the mix, and they're playing, and he's playing. And after every take, I would ask, are you hearing okay? He was like, yeah. And I finally said, you know what, I'm going to shut up and let him play because he's clearly having a great time, even though the technology's nothing he's ever experienced. But he walked into the place and was made so comfortable, and he got it. This is where you make music. This is different than a bar, but it's not much different. And he had a great time, and it was a great record. So that was the big thing with especially the second studio in the warehouse, was that it was musically comfortable. You walked in and you just saw nothing but stuff to make music with.
Right.
All those things. Everything was about music. And so you got it. This is where you make music. So what's the problem? Yeah. So that was a great part. That's what I really liked about it, is that it was so comfortable. It was a little too comfortable sometimes, but because all my personal stuff was there, and Joe's too, but for the most part, that was a very, very big plus for people who maybe were uncomfortable going to a studio. They just went. They walked in ours and they were like, "Yeah, this I get."
Mm.
So,
yeah. What were some of the what would you say? I guess as far as microphones, amps, anything that you owned in there. What were your favorite pieces that you remember?
I did a record with Andy Bob from
Sure, I've
Miracle
heard of
Bra.
him. I remember Andy Bob.
Miracle Bra record, yep. And I did it all with mechanical or analog derived reverb and delays.
Mm-hmm.
So there were no digital delays or reverbs. They were all either real, like in the room using room mics, or using the plate reverb, which is a mechanical reverb, or using spring reverb, which was the same, similar, but with springs, and or using analog delays, which were electronic, or tape delay, like tape echo. Remember the Echoplex?
Yep.
So we had all these things, and so it was kind of cool to like say, well, I'm going to put this limitation on it. But in the end, there was no limitation, because I had, if I needed 3 tape echoes, we had them. We had like 6 of them. I could just pull out another one and add another echo if I wanted. It was plenty, and it was great. So that's kind of the depth of everything, and that was kind of cool to set a parameter, and then work within it. And then I don't think I even told Andy till we were mixing. I said, this record is being done. There's no digital reverb or digital delay. It's all, yet there is delay and reverb. It's all analog, old school instruments. And he was like, wow, I didn't even think about that. That's cool. And he loved it. So those were some of the things. I mean, some of the amps, there was one Marshall, that Johnny Trotta's Marshall. He will not sell it. That guy has the best Marshall I've ever heard. And it's a 70s, a super lead. It's a JMP, and it's a 50-watt head. And that thing is possessed. It sounds possessed. We had it in the basement, and we had it all through the warehouse years till 2018, and he took it back. Mm-hmm. And everybody offered to buy it from him. Joe, me, everybody that's ever used it was like, Johnny Trotta's Marshall, man, is it for sale? And we were so scared to change the tubes in it, because I was afraid that was part of the tone. The tubes, like I hope we never blow a tube. I hope to never have to change tubes in that amp. Like, please just, because that's part of I don't know. I have no idea. We never did change the tubes. It never needed it. And it was the noisiest. You plugged the guitar in and you heard crackles and hiss and noise, like loud. Mm-hmm. And then you started playing and you went, holy hell, this is the voice of God. So that was one of my favorites that I never got to own that one. But but that one was possessed. And we had other Marshalls, and they all sounded great. But that one was like somehow a step above. So a lot of people used it, because that would be the one, if someone said, hey man, I want a really good like hard rock sound, or if they knew Marshall, they said, I want a Marshall. And I said, you got to plug into that one. And so he has it to this day. So I hope he plays it. Yeah.
I'm sure he does. He's doing a few things. I spoke to him not too long ago, and we're going to get the Uncle Moldy thing going again. We have a couple of opportunities to do that too, but we do those acoustic anyhow. But yeah. He
that amp that'd be too loud. It'd be the loudest amp, loudest 50-watt I ever heard too.
Yeah. He tunes in from time to time, and
great.
So I'm sure I'll make sure that I'll get him to listen to this one too,
Yeah.
Now, how about some of the bands? I know that some of the people that I knew, because not only did we record there, we also used to play a lot of the same clubs, and there was even times when we were booked together. There was, we did, a number of shows with Red Dye. And then we also, and Fit, we played at the Rage with Fit. And then I think once we did with Last Picture Show.
I was doing sound for them during that time. I recorded their first record.
Right.
In fact, that was the first record we ever recorded in the basement.
Was that right?
Yeah, the first Last Picture Show record.
Yep.
Was the first record we ever did, and that's how we got the name. Because Lou Maestro, the singer, was sort of riffing on something, man. Hey, what are you going to call the place? And we were like, I don't know. And he had a song called Invisible Girl. He's like, hey, invisible girl, invisible girl, invisible sound. That's what you should be. And he actually coined the name. That's where we got it.
Is that right? Right? You want to talk about a small world? His brother and sister are two of my actors.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah. They do murder mysteries with me in the Fowl Players of Perryville group. And
right.
I actually had a good long talk with him at a get together at his sister's one time. She had a bunch of actors over and he was there, and I got talking to him probably for a couple of hours. Unfortunately, we ended up talking about all the people that we remembered from the other bands we played around that have died.
Oh, right. And there seemed to be a lot of that lately. So, yeah.
God, it's like, geez, a whiz. It just seems like, it goes through phases where, we lose a lot of them and then it doesn't, but it's just awful, I guess.
Well, I think also with social media, you know, as soon as it happens, you know about it now. So, that just makes it seem like it's more people going than
perhaps
you would think, but yeah,
perhaps. But when you start putting the 5s and 6s in front of your age, the odds definitely rise a little bit here. And, but it was a good talk with him, and they were a good band. They were a good band. You have another brother, I think, was in that band, didn't you?
Yeah. My brother Keith was played guitar in the band a little bit later. Yeah.
Oh, like
originally it was Andy Rathgaber. I think was the original guitar player.
Okay.
And then my brother took over, and we were doing sound for that band most of the places. And like at above the Marble Bar, the what was that there? The Congress Hotel in the Congress. There was a club above the Marble Bar for a few years. We played a lot there. I played in Towson, like at the the investment bill, Delaney Inn, yeah, stuff like that. So
there was a pre-Orange Seed Parade story about the Delaney Inn. That I don't know if you remembered this one or not, but before there was Orange Seed, we had Fritz and I had Fritz's Dynamite.
Oh, okay, didn't know that.
And Sean and Nat were in a band called Wicked Symphony.
Okay.
And they were playing at the Delaney Inn one night, and Nat threw lighter fluid on his guitar.
Oh.
And and apparently the sound man, oh God, I can't remember who it was, but he lit his guitar on fire. They were doing My Generation, and they wanted to do like the Who, and
right.
So they did that, and then I can't remember if the fire spread or if just a bunch of stage equipment got damaged, and there was like a huge brawl. People were running out of the building. I don't know if the fire spread or not or whatever, but he ran out of the building. Ran down the street, was like, help, and then some guy's like, what's up? And he goes, get me out of here. So he told the guy what happened, and it turned out the guy was friends with the sound man and drove him right back to the club. And but apparently that was a huge thing. It was Wicked Symphony. That was before Orange Seed. And then after that, we kind of merged with them. It was two of us from Fritz's Dynamite, and then those two went, and then Chad was in Wicked Symphony, and he ended up in Red Dye after Stumpy,
right?
And he also ended up with Fritz, with 20 Ripped Angel too,
right.
Yeah. So things kind of go full circle after a while.
Oh yeah. And then Nat Bradley was in the Pale Stars.
Yes. You
remember them? And that was Brant from Splitsville or Greenberry Woods, and I recorded all their stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Now, what was what was it like working with Red Dye? I mean, they spoke the world of you. And
Well,
did you know them in school? Did you go to school with those guys too?
no, they were in town. I don't think so. it's
Curly?
it's getting hazy.
Okay.
But they lived next to my aunt.
Okay.
In this giant house off of York Road. And so I already heard about them from my aunt saying there's this band that moved in next to us that make all this noise, and they're just making noise the whole time. And then Bill called me because I had the studio, and he was asking like, "Hey Dave, what's good for insulation? What's good to damp sound? We're having problems with the neighbors." I'm like, "I know, it's my aunt." And she's called me about it, not knowing that I knew Bill. I knew him. I think a lot of them were going to Towson, and I may have been going to Towson or just finished going to Towson. So I may Towson State. So I may have overlapped there. Okay. And one day he called. He goes, "Dave, for sound insulation, how good is dirt?" And I'm like, "Dirt? How much dirt?" He's like, "A big pile of dirt." And I was like, "Well, that'll be really good." And so then I came to their practice basement, and they had, like a typical basement with the window up high, the small window, and it's kind of dug into the ground a little.
Right.
They literally closed the window and filled it from the outside, that area, with dirt, piled it up higher than the ground. And so when you were in the basement and you looked at the windows, all you saw was the glass, and you saw dirt behind the glass. And it still didn't work because the floor was so bad. It went right up the floor and went right out the first floor.
Oh yeah.
They still never got over that. They had, that was the Red Dye house for a long time where they rehearsed. But but they were great to record. My memory of the first record was the band are playing. So Stumpy and Bill and the drummer
Mark, I think.
Mark Addy, right?
Yeah.
The original drummer.
Yep.
Are out playing, and Larry's in the control room, and he's feverishly writing. I'm like, "Larry, what are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm writing the words. I've never sang these songs before." And I was like, "What?" And so they played the whole record like that, and Larry filled a copybook with words. And then I set up a vocal mic. So they did it instrumentally. I set up a vocal mic, and Larry went out, and everybody else is sitting in the control room, and he starts singing, literally holding up the paper, singing. And they're like, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Hey, we could sing here." And they're figuring out backup vocals, like chant type stuff, while Larry's singing. And I'm like, "Oh, I know why, because they've never heard him sing it." And so when he finished singing the whole record, they literally went out, like 3 on the mic or 4 with Larry, and they were like, "Okay, we're going to chant this here." And, you watch too much Oprah, and everybody chants. And they did the backup vocals. The whole record was done in like 6 hours.
Wow.
The whole thing, man. The whole first record was an afternoon.
Jeez, a whiz.
Wow. Yeah. And because they sat and practiced in their basement, instrumentally, the songs, and Larry had ideas. He knew what he wanted to sing. He just didn't have it where he was singing it with them until they recorded the record. He was like, he finished all the words then.
Okay.
So that was my memory of the first record. Now the later stuff was more planned out. It was much more finished, when they came in. But the first record was really a punk record.
Yeah.
It was really punk rock, and I used to go up to that house with the dirt windows on a Saturday night and help, like before a gig, and they would silkscreen the T-shirts.
Yeah.
One by one, man, and stick them on a board, put the screen and do them, and then somebody's girlfriend would hang them up, and they'd be trying to hang them everywhere. It's dry, they're wet. And then the screen, after like 4 or 5, because we were drinking beer too, and it took a while, and the screen would dry, the ink on the screen, and they would have to take it in the bathtub and spray it in the shower to clear it all out again. Then it would be wet with water, so you had to wait. So that was like beer time, and then you would make 5 more shirts and the screen would clog up again and someone would have to wash it out and you'd have another beer. And that was kind of the whole idea. And then their swag would sell out in an instant at a show. They would play a show and everybody bought everything. I remember the first record also, they put out on cassette, which was popular at the time, right? And but they had no money. So they literally bought from a preacher cassettes of his sermons that did not sell. So they were used. And then they bought at Circuit City, they had a 90-day return policy. So they bought those, those double cassette dupers.
Yeah.
They bought like 2 or 3 of them. They got their mom to buy them on her credit card. And they had like 200 cassettes that had the preacher's thing on them. And you know how the little tab's broken out and you put the tape on it and you can re-record it. So they said, hey, everybody in the house, when you wake up and come down to have breakfast, put in 3 cassettes and start them. And they had the done pile and the ready to go pile. And then when you come home from school, put in 3 cassettes. And when you come down for dinner, put in 3 cassettes. Everybody was doing it. We're duping these cassettes in the high-speed machines. At the end of a month, they duped them all. They returned the machines for their money back, for their mom's money back at Circuit City. And they had all the cassettes. And then I'll never forget the cover was a photograph of them. So what they did is, this is how ingenious you had to be at the time. Someone figured out that the certain size camera film, the prints, like 5x6 or 4x6, if you folded them right, fit inside they were the J card for the cassette.
Sure, yeah.
So they took a picture of themselves, they took a piece of paper and wrote the song titles on it and lined them up on a table and got the cheapest film they could find, like 36 exposures, and sat there and took 36 pictures and then went to the photo place and got the double prints. So they got 64 prints out of 1 roll of film, and those were the J card for the cassette. So we would have a party and we would all be drinking beer and folding the photos to make the insert for the cassettes. It was ingenious, man. And then when the recording ran out, the preacher came on. Because
no kidding.
At first they were trying to bulk erase the tapes. They borrowed my bulk eraser, which is a big magnet, electromagnet. And they borrowed it and burned it up because they didn't realize you couldn't run it for like an hour and a half straight. You had to let it like cool down, and the inside of it melted. So they did bulk erase most of the tapes, but then in the end, they just when their program was finished, you had the preacher come on and he finished up the tape. So it was perfect. The original red dye cassette was just brilliant.
I love it. We did a lot of the same things, similar things. We found ways to, stretch our dollar and everything when it came to flyers and posters. And, but it was such a different time back then too. And whenever I've had bands on, from back in those days, everybody kind of concurs. I mean, it was just such it was a lot more personable back then. I mean, you would go out and hand people flyers and maybe a cassette or 2. Yeah. Nowadays, they look at you like you got 4 heads if you do that,
Yes. And I think there was a lot of interband, like the bands were, competing, but I still think there was a lot of friends and there was a lot of people that were into other local bands and into other local music and would go and see friends' band.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas nowadays, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, I always said that, there was, it was different. The thing that was difficult about playing back then, if there were friends' bands that you liked, a lot of times you were playing too. But, when you got a chance, I would always, go see Red Dye when I got a chance.
Right.
I used to love Mystic Force. I used to love
Oh,
the
yeah,
Russians. And there was a lot of other ones too. Mary Suicide. I used to enjoy
right.
them. Oh gosh. DC Star. Well, DC Star and the Ravens. Those guys were kind of around when I was younger.
And that was a top
Yeah.
tier there.
Yeah. Winter Sun. I mean, good Lord, those guys used to sneak me into bars when I was 16.
Yeah.
So I would, because I used to have to carry Bobby's SVT head up the steps of Feathers. And
I remember Feathers. Yep.
Yep. And it's a hell of a place. Well, that and the Paragon were awful places to carry an SVT head because they both had the steps to nowhere.
Steps. Yep.
And that was something else. But I used to enjoy playing with Fit of Frustration. We always had good times with those guys. Dom and Dominic, unfortunately, we lost a couple of years ago, but Dave Walper, they were a couple of nice friends I had from high school. I knew those guys from Calvert Hall. Yeah.
Right.
And then I remembered your brother from back then too, Craig.
Right. Younger brother. Yeah.
Yeah. He was 87. I was 86.
Okay.
Yep. And, I remembered him. I never put two and two together with you guys until we'd been recording there for a while. I never knew you were his brother until I think you mentioned your last name was Nachodsky. And I was like, oh, I knew a Nachodsky. Oh, okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Yep. So, what about some other bands that you worked with back in those days? Anybody else you'd want to mention or?
Well, yeah, one of the ones that really made an impression on me was Splitsville. So I did maybe 3 records with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I toured with the prior band, the Greenberry Woods, who got signed to Warner Brothers and did some touring and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was their live sound engineer. So that was a great time. And I would go on a tour for a couple weeks and come home and do the studio.
Right.
For a couple months and then do another tour and then come back. And it was great. And if I wasn't there, Joe was doing stuff or Marty, who was a later partner. Yeah. And, so I could kind of afford to step away from the studio a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, after that, the Splitsville sort of just power pop was just a big influence on me.
Yeah.
So it was great to be able to record. And if someone said, I want to do 7 guitar tracks on this song, they did.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we did. And it was like, or they would do a song and it would be 40 tracks and then it would have this outro. And they would be like, we're going to do like this Brian Wilson thing on the outro. And then there's like electric sitar and all these weird instruments. 40 other tracks on the outro that aren't in the song, and it was just a fun time to be able to record all that stuff. Or at the warehouse, we had a big hallway. And I remember Brant was like, I want to play the snare drum at the end of the hallway. Mm-hmm. And you can put the mics up at the front. Like 100 feet away. And I had to put a mic close too, but I want this giant sound like the sound of the Boxer, which they used an elevator shaft.
Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel, right.
Boom.
Bam. That big snare drum. That the story of that is it was an empty elevator shaft.
Oh, is that right?
That they put the drum in and did it. So this was his version of that, And so we would do things like that and have just a great time. Like, oh, you don't mind me taking 10 minutes because I got to run like 300 feet of mic cable. And they were like, no, do it. We'll call us when you're ready, and I would do it. And there were other guys. We had a stairwell. We did have an empty stairwell for a while right outside the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know Mark Riley. He's a harmonica player and a piano player. He was in early bands with me too.
Okay.
He was in Spellbound. He played guitar and keyboards. Yeah.
Okay.
Not Spellbound. He was in that band too with me. That was my first band, but he was in Larceny.
Oh, sure.
Also with Joe and Ed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Sue Ellen, the singer. So he would be like, I want to play in that stairwell, harmonica. So I got pictures of him in this abandoned stairwell with no lighting. playing harmonica like on a Saturday night, late at night. And so that was great. That was great, like just time at the studio because the place was empty for most of the part. We had free reign there, so that was great.
Interesting. How many, if you could do a guess, how many acts would you say you recorded there over the years?
I did do an estimate, at least 600.
Wow.
I think it was 600 albums or EPs or demos, because it wasn't all albums, and it wasn't all 12 songs.
Right. 600 projects, I guess.
Projects, yeah, at least. I would say at least.
Okay. And
it was a lot. It was just, I was going every day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know you were. I mean, I just imagine, that was just you were putting in some time there. I know you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how many years was it open?
Well, so 28 years in the warehouse. Right. Since 1990. Right. And then the basement was about 6 years. So maybe 84 to 90 was the 83 or 4. I graduated high school in 82. So I was started right after.
Okay.
I was going to college and building a recording studio. The cool thing about the basement, it had a ceiling with the slats of wood.
Yeah.
And there was this guy, Marty Kennelly, who later became a partner with us. But at the time he wasn't. And we knew him because he was like this local sound guy who knew everything about sound. And so we called him on the phone. And it was like, Marty, we need to do acoustics. But it's a basement. And it's, described it. He's like, well, your only thing there is to do the ceiling. And we were like, what? And he described how to do these slats and hang them with dowels. Like, so there's a 1-inch space and put a 1-inch space between them and like 2 layers of them offset. It was technical. And we went out and bought the wood and did it by hand, Joe and I, without ever having Marty see it. And then I had this terrible feeling. The day he was coming down, we were going to open, and I was like, oh my God, what if Marty walks down and looks up and goes, what the hell did you do? Like, we got it wrong, right? And luckily he walked down and he shook his head. He was like, yep, that's the way to do it.
Oh, good.
And that ceiling made that room sound, it didn't sound like a basement. It sounded very neutral instead of having a bad acoustic. Because a lot of basements with drywall, have a bad acoustical sound. It just sounds bad. And it didn't. It sounded just kind of neutral, like it didn't have a sound. And so whatever you recorded, you got the sound of.
Right.
So yeah.
That's great. Wow. Well, that's quite a history you all had there. I mean, 600 projects, and there's,
Well, that was just me.
Yeah.
So Joe did his own and Marty did his own. And, so all told, I don't know how many people came through there, but, in 34, 35 years, that, it's a long time too.
Yep. Now, did you, I thought I remembered that you all may have had some other projects in there besides just bands. Didn't you do some, maybe you did some commercials or things that down there too? Yeah.
We did some commercials, not too many, but some. And then the cool stuff was we did some projects that were like sound for. There was one that was animatronics, so they were these robot animals. Like, it was in a mall in Florida.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be interactive for kids. And they built a pond, a fake pond. They put 2 alligator robots in there.
Oh, sure.
They could rise up and open their mouths and like talk. And then so they put up a boat, and they put a pelican on the boat, and they put flamingos in the water. They could raise their leg up and stuff and talk and move their heads, and their eyes all moved. And so we had to do the soundtrack. So the idea was that the animals would kind of every 25 minutes, so that people would drive to this mall just to watch this, bring their kids and watch it. They loved it because then they would all go shopping, right? So every 25 minutes, the animals were you just heard like water sounds and nature sounds. And the animals were just moving a little bit, looking around. And every 25 minutes or so, they'd wake up and start talking to each other. And then they would sing a song.
Okay,
so,
sure.
And Marty was the musical genius. And he wrote all the songs and the words. And, he named it was Pete the Pelican. And, they all had names and they all it was like Disney, but in a mall, and
right.
We had to get the actors to come in and play the characters, so there was like a Rastafarian, one of the Pelicans was like Rastafarian or Jamaican,
right.
And he had to sing a song. It was an island song about, and it was all uplifting songs. And then one thing we did as the last thing, the guy that was designed all this, guy named Danny, was like, "Hey, can you do a thing because I have a technical problem where, if their wings, like I want to have an easy way for a guy that's not a technician, that's just a guy with a check mark, can you make them just move each of their parts that move?" And then the guy can run that program as a special program, like before it opens, to see if anything's broken, right? So Marty devised this exercise thing. Hey, everybody, put your left wing up. Put your right wing up. And all the mechanical robots were doing it. And so what happened was, in the morning, the mall walkers, the old people walk the mall.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They used to all wait for it. And it's 7 a.m. They'd wait for the exercise thing, and they were all doing it with the animals.
Is that right?
It was the funniest thing ever. Like the main guy, Danny was like, we had no idea. This was supposed to be like a diagnostic thing for like to see if their lips were not moving anymore, right? Or the eye was broken, right? And like, turn your head to the left, turn your head to the right. And Marty turned it into a song, and we got the actors to sing it, because it was one more thing we got to do. And it was not meant for anything but checking if they're broken,
Wow.
And then they put it on the schedule. They played it early in the morning a couple times through, and all the mall walkers would go down and wait for it, and then they would all do their stretches.
Wow.
So
that's
cool. It was another one. It was there's a woman named Trish who did these sort of like these children's shows, and it was the same thing where we had actors. It was all voice acting, and it was all comic. And within the show, there may be like interviews with people, and there were theme songs, and then there would be a sort of fractured fairy tale, if you remember those.
Oh yeah, very
cartoons.
well. Yeah,
but it was audio only, and it was like, and again, Marty wrote all this and played it all. He was a keyboard whiz, and we would get all the actors, and that's where I learned to do a lot of editing, because the as an actor, if you're voiceover with someone else, you can't overlap.
Yep.
Right, if you're live in the same room, so you would spread out the dialogue a little too much. It was a little unnatural, and then I would have to go in as the editor and snip it and move it so it felt right. But the actors had to bring all the characters, and everything. So those were fun, man, because it was music, but it was more than music. So those are really good.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. I've seen a couple of voiceover things that I've been involved with. I do a lot of I do quite a few things for like training films they show at work.
Okay.
I narrate those, some medical things. The thing is, the unfortunate thing about it is that they're proprietary, so I don't even get a copy when I'm done. I just go in and record and leave.
Right. If it's a corporate thing, right, you don't get to see it.
Right.
Well, no, I actually went with the animal thing. We went to the mall and helped them program it, and saw it working. Yep. So that was actually really cool to see it.
Interesting. And you're self-taught and all this stuff too. You kind of learn Oh, wow. See, that's really cool. I mean, you started this off just as an interest, and you just grew and grew and grew with it, learning it all yourself. I mean, you didn't
Oh yeah,
study at Sheffield, or you didn't, go to any kind
no.
of school for this. This was all done yourself. Wow.
We
Wow.
started. I started hanging with Joe. We hung with this guy Gary Zubrowski, who was
Hmm.
older than us,
Yeah.
who had a place on Key Highway back when
Uh-huh.
you could afford a place on Key Highway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was an old carriage house that he had converted to a studio, and he
Hmm.
built. He couldn't afford reverb, so he built himself a plate reverb,
Hmm.
like by hand, which was a big mechanical frame that he welded,
Yeah.
and it held a sheet of stainless steel, like with
Hmm.
springs, and that was
Right.
the. Imagine if you hit that, it would just reverberate for a long time,
Hmm.
and that's what a plate reverb is. When
Hmm.
you see the setting in your processor, that's what it is.
Right. Right.
And he built because he couldn't, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't afford a real one.
Hmm.
So he was very practical, and we started hanging out. That's what got us started at his place.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Okay.
So yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. Well, Dave, this has been great having you on and everything.
yeah, same
I
here.
can't wait to get this out and have everybody hear it,
Great.
Yeah, I really think people are going to enjoy it. I've really enjoyed having you and catching up with you. It's been such a long time since I've really had a
Yep.
chance to speak with you and everything.
Yep. It was great to talk about the old, like Red Dye and just everybody back in the day, because
Yeah.
most everybody's still around, and I
Hmm.
still run into people
Yeah.
from that time. I just saw Bill and Larry.
Yeah.
They came in toward the new place here, so
Hmm.
they may be doing another record. So
Yeah, yeah, we were talking about that. We were talking about that, and I got a copy of their most recent one, and it's
yep,
great.
it's really good.
It's they did a wonderful job, and there was Stumpy and Mark are doing other things now, so they have a new rhythm section. I tell you, those
Yeah.
guys are good.
Yep.
We were talking about that. Those guys are just they've really got a good thing going again. I'm glad they were able to come back with it, and I'll be there when they
Yep.
play. Believe me, if they get out
Good.
and do something, I'll be there. Believe me, I will. So tell us, just for a little bit here about your new surroundings here, Stages Music Arts. If you want to talk about the company or anything you want to tell us
Sure.
about that and how to find
Sure.
you.
They it's a studio complex in Cockeysville, so we're not
Okay.
that far. Uh,
Hmm.
that the building has like lots of private rooms for music lessons, so that's
Hmm.
part of what happens. I'm not involved with that, but there's
Hmm.
two recording studios that are
Hmm.
giant with really really top end gear,
Hmm.
and what's cool is the kids taking lessons. You could be in a band now. You can take lessons to be in a band.
Hmm.
They rehearse in the studios when
Oh.
we're using them. So they get experience of being in a studio just rehearsing, and then like at the end of their semester or when their thing is done, we'll either record them or they'll have we'll do a live stream with video, or
Hmm.
they'll do a performance like on. We have a performance hall also, so they'll perform out there and live stream it so parents can see it or family, and parents can come watch their. So I'm doing uh I'm doing just a different thing every day, which is
Right.
great.
Right.
So
Hmm.
it's straight recording. It's recording with video or recording music videos. That's
Hmm.
another thing a lot of people are doing here,
Hmm.
or doing a live show or recording a live show in the studio because all the rooms are linked together
Hmm.
digitally. So I can be in the control room and record a live show in the performance hall.
Hmm.
So it's very interactive for me, and it's a really well put together place
Hmm.
that I think you can pretty much do anything you can think of we could do here. So
Hmm.
that's nice.
Oh, great, great. And how can we find it?
Oh, well, stagesmusicarts.com.
Okay, stagesmusicarts.com. Well, great,
Yeah.
great. Well, Dave, again, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's great to catch up and everything here. And folks,
yeah, same here.
Yep, we have been listening to Dave Nachodsky here on Fowl Players Radio. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Take care.
All right. See you.
Okay.